Uh, Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Tom's Hardware Podcast for May 11th, 2021. As always, I'm your host, Abram Pelch, Editor-in-Chief of Tom's Hardware. We're joined by Les Pounder, our Associate Editor, Raspberry Pi expert Ash Puckett, and a very special guest this week, Pete Lomas, co-founder of Raspberry Pi. Pete, thank you so much for joining. It's such an honor. How are you?
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm well, thank you. So I'm looking forward to having a chat. I mean, it seems like forever.
Yeah.
Especially catching up with Les after the lockdown and the impact that's had on our community, which is something we can perhaps chat about later.
Yeah, well, so what has it been like for you? Have you gotten to spend more time doing Raspberry Pi projects now that there's a lockdown? Since there's been a lockdown?
Well, no, unfortunately, it's been the opposite for me. I was hoping, I might end up on furlough or something, but I've actually been in the office every day because for my day job, I run a manufacturing business, and we've just had to keep going. So it's been all about the staff, how to keep them safe, how to look after them, how to get them tested, how to help them if they think they've got COVID, how to help them when somebody in their family has got COVID. So it's been a big sort of double dip for us, really, as well as trying to make electronics in the process. But now, it's like everything. You just have to get on and do it. And, I feel, if you actually look around the globe, we're in good shape in comparison. We need to reach out and help. But hey, in enough of that, we came to talk about Pi, which is another reach out and help, I think, but in a different format.
Yeah, no doubt. So Pete, how did you, for folks who aren't familiar with your story, how did you get started? How did you get involved in the Raspberry Pi project?
Well, I suppose it depends how far you want to go back, really. I mean, you could go back to when I was 13 and ended up coming back from Manchester on a bus with half a telephone exchange, which was a bit of a lug. But I then converted that into a noughts and crosses machine. And that sort of got me started on what I call making. I mean, it was a simple sort of computer, if you look at it in a way. And my mum used to get really mad because, I don't know whether you know, but if you're a soldering fanatic, one of the temptations with leaded solder was always to flick the solder off the end of the soldering iron onto the floor. So that always just ended up in the carpet, and glued to the carpet, wouldn't come out. And my mum used to get frenetic. But that was sort of my start of my maker journey, I suppose, right back at being 13. And that's important because then, I hated school. I was hopeless at school. I'll be honest with you, I couldn't see the point. So I left and went to a technical college where they had stuff. They had stuff you could play with. They had stuff you could mess with. They had stuff you could break as I found out sometimes to my cost. But there, now this is, I'm dating myself, right? This is 1971, and it's exactly the time that the Intel 4004. So I call it before microprocessors. So it's 1971 BM, yeah. But the college had a PDP-A. I don't know whether any of you guys, well, Les might know what it is, but do you ever remember those? It was the first commercial mini computer made by Digital Equipment Corporation out of Massachusetts, and they had one, and it was great. I poked my head round the door on my first day at college and went, shiny, what's that? And the guy that actually looked after it, because I think they'd spent about $30,000 on it, so they weren't going to let anybody use it. He said, no, sorry, you're on an ONC course, and this is for the degree students only. I thought, bummer. Anyway, just as I sort of turned on my heels, he said, "You'd always come back at lunchtime, though." And that guy sat me down at a terminal, and it ran this 5-user basic, and of course, the inevitable first program. You know, the 10 print hello world, and then 20 go to 10, and then run. And then this paper starts spewing out, because I mean, we didn't have terminals in those days. It was just like a type. Of course, he'd done this a couple of times to people, I can tell, because it's like we got to like half a meter of paper. You know, notice I've gone metric now. There's about half a meter of paper, then a meter's worth of paper, printing hello, then a meter and a half. Then and I'm thinking, how do I stop this? So you type stop, cancel. Of course, it'd take you a million years to realize what you needed to do was type Control-C in those days to stop your computer program.
Oh, you still have to, right? I mean,
yeah, well, I'm quite upset. I mean, I type Control-C all the time and absolutely nothing happens. It's Control-Alt-Delete or Control-Break or something, you know. But the thing about that is that guy Graham, he gave me access, he gave me encouragement, and he also led me around, you know, garden path a few times with it. But the thing he did was so important. He gave me that important access to a computer. And ever since then, I've been looking for something to give back in the same way Graham had given to me, because I just used it for everything. And I probably from that day became a digital maker. So we're years down the path now. Back in 2008, and I built some electronics for Imperial College, and I got a phone call off the professor, Professor Wayne Luck. He said, we're having like a symposium, or as you Northerners call it, a show and tell. And would, you know, do you fancy coming down and have a look at this electronics you built? We've actually got it all programmed and working. And I think to this day, I think what would have happened if I'd said, nah, I've got quite a lot on, but I didn't. I said, yeah, great. So I went down there and I sat next to this bearded guy that I didn't know. And after the symposium, we were walking across Hyde Park and we just got chatting. And it turned out that he was a professor of computer science at Cambridge. And he was really saying that the skill level of students had really started to drop off at Cambridge. And some of them had never debugged a line of code. They'd never written their own programs. And we were sort of pondering why that might be. And one of the things was the package systems that the kids were growing up with, which are really closed for obvious reasons because they're a consumer product. And he said, well, we've sort of got this idea to make a little computer. It didn't have a name then. I thought, that's a brilliant idea. You know, let's go back to the Spectrums, the BBC Micros, and let's try and re-engage the creativity of young people. I mean, they have loads of creativity and they're just brimming with it. It's just giving that creativity an outlet. And I was, you know, massively enthusiastic. So really, it was a short trip to Cambridge. Actually, it was an agonizing wait. I think everybody was on holiday. It was about 3 weeks before I got down there. But that first meeting, we just knew we had to do something. And that's really how Raspberry Pi started. We suddenly had a cohort of people who were just determined to make it happen.
Wow, that's amazing. So I understand putting GPIO pins on the Raspberry Pi was your idea?
Oh yeah, I'm a very much a GPIO fanatic. I think when the PC arrived, my heart sank because GPIO pins had disappeared. Yeah, they criminalized GPIO, and it wasn't fair. And you had to either buy a GPIO card, which actually the company I worked for then actually made, or you had to do some horrendous kludge around the printer port. I mean, the number of things that were hacked onto printer ports to actually make it work was incredible.
That sounds awful.
Yeah. The GPIO is what makes Raspberry Pi so special, in my opinion. Like, you can give somebody an expensive Linux computer, but the fact that you can use the GPIO to interact with almost anything is what really makes it stand out.
Yeah, I think we perhaps didn't realize at the time. I mean, there's the original when we were making the first Raspberry Pis. Eben accidentally left the GPIO connector on the bomb. We were going to take it off to save a few cents, but he accidentally left it on. I mean, if you actually look at the GPIO on the original Pi, you can actually split it into two 10-way connectors, and you get power and grounds on both of those 10-way connectors. One has I2C on, the other has SPI, and it would have allowed you to route it to all sorts of different modules off the board. But we ended up putting it on, and that, I won't say inadvertently, but it generated a community effort to build add-on boards. And I think if I look back, you know, yes, putting the GPIO on was good because I like hanging wires off computers. That's my reason to be. But that community effort to build IO boards of one sort or another, some great, some not so great, some absolutely bizarre, like one called Pie Fish, but it was great. You know, it gave some LEDs and some buttons that you could actually program. So then you can imagine you're in the situation where you've got a computer that can go all the way from flashing a LED right through the internet to doing anything with Linux. So almost you've got the full spectrum of capability in one little $35 computer. And that $35 is really important because if you're going to hang wires on them, then you don't want to be in the situation. I mean, just imagine, you know, you take the back off your MacBook and you start trying to figure out where to solder a few wires. And then all of a sudden there's a puff of blue smoke and that's the MacBook up in flames. You know, you're going to get in serious trouble. It had to be cheap enough to risk breaking it.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, that's why I guess I'll ask Pete the question that we ask all of our guests, except it seems unfair in your case, but how many Raspberry Pis do you have right now?
A couple of hundred.
You win. You hit the high score.
I brought two of the originals with me.
Beautiful.
And then I thought, I'll bring a keyboard, right? And then I realized I'd accidentally picked up.
Oops.
400. Yeah.
Because I can't tell the difference immediately with my bad eyesight. So,
I couldn't. When I got the parcel from Raspberry Pi, I opened the parcel. I'm like, it's a keyboard, and picked it up. And I'm like, oh, GPIO.
Yeah, that happens. Right. That happened to me just yesterday, actually, because like my, I have both a regular Raspberry Pi keyboard and the 400. And my daughter, who's 2, likes to grab things out of my office and just run around with them. And I'll let her run around with a regular keyboard because why not? But I saw her running around the other day. I was like, oh, no problem. She's running around with the keyboard. And then I realized, oh, actually, she was running around with the Raspberry Pi 400 because it was. But you know, I got to be careful when I let her in here. She digs into my drawer and just starts pulling Raspberry Pis out and running all around. Yeah, so my son, he pulls them out and he knows what to do with it because he's 9, and so he's constantly programming it. And to your point, it's like you just can't have one because when you're working on a project, you're gonna attach a board to it or you're gonna attach wires to it, and then you've got another project. And if this was an expensive computer, you would not have a lot of projects. You just start pulling the wires out. But you know, for a Raspberry Pi, you just get another Raspberry Pi for another project. So, you know, hence we have dozens of them.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I have lots is because doing quite a lot of the community outreach, every time somebody created a project, I'd sort of mither them a little bit and say, oh, could you send me a bit of your hardware so I could then add a Raspberry Pi to it and make it into another demo kit. So I have at home, I mean, if we were doing this at home, it'd all be behind me. I've got like 40 boxes of various demos of Raspberry Pis that do various tricks. So whenever I go and do a talk, I like to lay all these out. It takes them hours to set it all up. It's so worth it because the kids just go, well, wow, what's this? You know, all the way from the little scratch. I have a little scratch demo where it does traffic lights, and it does the real traffic lights, and the little I think it's a penguin I've got now, walks across the road, turns around and comes back, and through to one of the flight aware things that's actually tracking flights, and the kids are looking on there going, oh, there's a flight there now, and running outside looking for it. Unfortunately, this is the UK, so it's nearly always cloudy, so they're quite disappointed.
Yes.
But, sorry, go on.
No, that's great. We actually just put up a tutorial a couple weeks ago on how to do the flight, do a flight aware with Raspberry Pi. So, very,
it's really cool. I really like it. But yeah, I mean, a friend of mine rang me. He said, I've set it all up and it doesn't work at all. He said, it's complete rubbish. I said, it could be the fact that you're actually in a flight restricted area and you get no flights over where you are, because he's actually on the Cumbrian coast, and there are no flight paths around where he was. I got him a bigger aerial and then he was sorted. It was just the ranging thing.
So
that's the trouble with computers. They do exactly what you tell them to.
Oh, exactly. They're quite annoying in that way, aren't they?
Yes. What do you do with Raspberry Pi Foundation today?
Well, I mean, so I did it feels like forever, but I did like 10 and a half years. But now I really just get involved in the community. And that's been a bit of a hardship, really, because obviously with the last, I basically retired from Raspberry Pi as a trustee and immediately seemed to go into lockdown. And all our jams have stopped, other than online. I then got really busy at the office. So I am looking forward to getting back to it with a vengeance, really. But we have rules and regulations about charities in the UK about how long you can serve as a trustee, and basically my time was up. I mean, to be fair, they stretched it and stretched it and stretched it as long as they could, but eventually you get to a point where you can't stretch it anymore. But I don't think that was, I think it was a very much a high point to go out on. I think the biggest challenge was, of course, having designed the initial Raspberry Pi, was actually to give that baby away, because I have a full-time job. And the only way we were going to take it forward, the way it's been taken forward, and I have to say incredibly successfully, was to have a full-time team working on it. So that was a bit of a wrench, but I think that... So we'd done the original. The original was a prototype that accidentally got out in the wild. So there's a few things I would have liked to have tidied up, but never got a chance. Once we'd established that shape, it was a bit hard and a bit unfair to actually mess with it too much early doors, because it meant that people's cases actually were going to be messed up. Now, one of the reasons for spreading all the connections all the way around it was to try and stop people putting it in a case. I didn't want it in a case. I wanted it to be exposed, so you could actually see the thing that you were actually programming and the thing you were hanging wires off. It was quite important to do that. But of course, within an instant, having not put any mounting holes in, people found ways of making a case. And one very enterprising young Girl Scout from Brereton, I think it was, made a Lego case for it. Almost. That's great. And it was fabulous. And then, of course, we know that, some of the makers like Pomeroni made this really smart case in multicolors. And that was a really nice sort of layer cake of a case. And I always remember I did a demo of Raspberry Pi in Liverpool. You might remember it, Les. We were in the university.
Oh,
it was one of your get-ups. I can't.
OggCamp.
OggCamp, that's it.
We had the open hardware forum at the top floor. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So I was doing this demo, and this young girl comes along and has a look in the has a look at this. And I had it in a Pi Bo, and she said, wow, that's really, really cool. Oh, you like electronics then? She said, nah, just the case, and walked off. So if anything's going to ground you when it comes to things like Raspberry Pi, you know, it's young girls making comments about the case, but actually what we were doing, we were actually showing people that as you actually made the Raspberry Pi do work, the chip and the RAM actually got warm. And you can actually talk about the physics of it, the energy is going in there to make it work. And so it gives you that really low level appreciation of also why, you know, your tower computers suddenly burst into life with 1 million fans as soon as you start running one of these massive games. But it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, my son learned how to use a Raspberry Pi before he ever built a PC. So when we were doing stuff with Pi, and I had to explain to him concepts like TDP and things like that, then later when we did a PC build, he's like, "Oh yeah, this is just like the Raspberry Pi." So like his interpretation of what a motherboard is like a big Raspberry Pi. That's his. That's how he sees it. He comes from the Raspberry Pi to a PC, not the other way.
The Pi is his PC foundation.
Yeah, that's his PC foundation, as it should be, right? Because it's a great way to teach your children and people who don't know a lot about computers exactly how a computer works. And you know, we've been doing them together since he was like 5. His first one we built was the Kano computer, which was a kit. I don't know if this is one of the kits that you've gotten sent, where you could just build. They give you it's pretty simple. They give you a Pi 3B or whatever, and you put it together. But you know, yeah, you learn how a computer works from it. So just, you know, so much to learn, so many projects. It's just amazing that this thing you built has not only, like, you know, powered really important, you know, projects, but just taught so many people so many things. What are some of your favorite Raspberry Pi projects that you've seen?
Oh, there's hundreds of them. I mean, I always remember, I think we were at the Royal Academy, and I was talking about, one of my favorite is the guy that made a mirror that actually told him what the weather was. But I didn't get quite to explain it. It wasn't the weather at his home, it was the weather at his office. So he knew when he got to his office whether it was going to be raining in where his office was. And somebody else did a really nice one with a set of stairs that illuminated different colors according to the temperature. And kids making robots, you know, these really, really basic robots. And then we get the ones that get just incrementally more sophisticated. And it's great to see, you know, how they'll start with something simple, and then they'll add things, and then they'll add things, and then they'll add things, and then eventually it all goes a bit slow. So the upgrade. I always remember giving a Pi 2 to a young girl that was actually she was a bit upset because her whole thing had ground to a standstill because it was still I think it was a Pi B. So I said, yeah, I'll try this one and see if it works. Yeah, it works. Brilliant. And, you know, it's being involved with, you know, seeing somebody actually get that LED to flash for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because they don't. And I think we were, again, Les, we were in Blackpool with a bunch of school kids. Do you remember?
250 school kids at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, yes. All learning how to create illuminations with Raspberry Pi.
That's right. And the thing was that, so in Blackpool they have this big tower, and the thing was, you create an illumination pattern on your Raspberry Pi, and the team from Blackpool were actually going to put it for one night only on the tower. And yeah, that was a fantastic day, seeing people who basically are the kids that were basically sat around having no idea what to do. Yeah. To actually being galvanized into making these super complex patterns. And I always remember that, you know, I generally, I mean, Les will explain this to you, is I almost have a Pi outfit that I wear on all my Pi outfits. One of them is a pink shirt and the other is a jacket, but Les, it's way too hot here to wear the jacket right today.
I was wondering where it was.
Yeah, I still got it. It's still wearing well. And this young folks pulls on my coattails saying, come along, come look at this, look what we've done. They were so excited, and it was brilliant.
It was awesome. It was great to see, because we had the secondary school kids, so that's high school in the US. So about 11 to 16, they were using unicorn hats when they'd just come out. And the younger kids had Piglows, or Piglo, as people used to call them.
Yes.
Which are like a little spiral design of LEDs. They're beautiful. They're very hard to come by now. But it's one of Pimoroni's very early designs. And the young kids were fascinated to code this spinning light thing. And there was one group who made animation on the unicorn hat. And there were only about 10 or 11 these kids. And it was the sun rising. And all they did was changing the colour of the ground from green to blue and have the sun go up. But they coded it all in Python. And they never touched it that morning. They just done it. So, wow.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it really makes the light go on for people.
I think it just shows the talent of youth, really. It just shows how much inbuilt creativity that they actually have, that we, I suppose, as a society, failed to tap into early enough. And that's one thing with Raspberry Pi we've tried to change.
I mean,
also, Pete, we tap into the children and we get the children interested in electronics and making and being creative, but we also help the educators do that. So, you know, I know you as Mr. Shaky Hand from Pi Academy for those many years, mate.
Yeah.
I don't know how many hands you shook in that time, but it was...
Oh, probably 1,000 plus. But yeah, so what had happened is that the Pi Academy was a 2-day adventure camp for teachers. I'm not going to call it a symposium or anything fancy like that. It was an adventure because they were really challenged. Some really enjoyed it. Some found it really tough. But it was all about digital making of one sort or another. And who could be the most brutal to Babbage Bear was the other thing. But we'll not go there in detail.
I'm not allowed to say anything more about that.
Yeah. So basically, on day 2, I would get a train or something to wherever it be, Glasgow, Birmingham, all over the country. Turn up about lunchtime, have a look at all the projects they were doing, have a chat with everybody, just explain why Raspberry Pi was so important to me and what it meant, the fact that they'd actually engaged with it. And then at the end, I'd obviously give out the certificates. Now, somebody who will remain nameless, who might be on this call, at one, I think it was it Glasgow, videoed each shaky handy and made it into a little, or photographed them and then made them into a video. And all you could see was buses going past the window and the people changing. It was, I've never managed to catch up with that video, but I'll have to try at some point. But I mean, it was a really, it was a pleasure to do that, really. Because they are all part of our community now and they add to the wealth of knowledge. The thing I always love is if somebody asks for some help in the Raspberry Pi community, you rarely get people that go, you're rubbish, you don't know what you're doing. People pile in and help.
And they rarely ask, why are you doing that on the Pi? They just accept you're doing it on the Pi for some reason. We're going to find a way to do it on the Pi.
Well, that's right. I mean, sometimes the Pi isn't the right vehicle to do it, you know.
But that's not the point.
Yeah, do it because you can, not because you should.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's my motto. Do it because you can, not because you should. I mean, we have done so many articles where people said, well, why would you actually want to do this? I said, because somebody else hasn't done it. Someone else hasn't done it yet.
Yeah. I mean, why would somebody want to put, a Raspberry Pi and a camera on the bottom of a weather balloon and let go? Why would you want to do that? Well, the answer is because it's just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Dave Ackerman did that really early days. And I was so pleased because he sent me a little note saying, I think it was at I think he got up he was close to 40,000, was it 40,000 feet, Les? He got
Something like that, yeah.
within a whisk of that. And of course, the temperature drops like a stone up there. He said, the GPS fell over, so I didn't, but the Pi kept working. I was going, yes.
Yeah, it's extremely durable. So even if you do break your $35, it's difficult to break your $35 computer, even if you try.
It can be, yeah. And I think that's one of the longevities of Pi, and obviously some good silicon design there by Mr. Upton, because it does seem to be remarkably robust. It doesn't take too kindly to having 5 volts shoved up its GPIO pins, though. That's probably the only way to get the blue smoke to appear. What's that, Les? Not that you've ever done that. No, you've never done that, have you, Les? Twice,
and the bodies are down here.
Yeah, I mean, I have one Pi that I broke, and I'm really not sure how I broke it, but that's okay because that way we use it for modeling things. It's like a hand model or whatever if we want to see if something fits.
I've not fried a Pi yet. I've corrupted more SD cards than I have actually damaged Pis.
That's the easy thing, as Les found out just today, right? Didn't your SD card get corrupted for trying to farm Chia?
Yeah, no. I managed to delete the bin folder or bin directory, which lost all the commands, so the system wouldn't boot. Luckily, I managed to have a backup ready and get it going again. So it's now trying its best to farm Chia as we're speaking.
Yes, we will see. Well, I know, Ash, you were working on a project as well.
Oh, for today?
Yeah. So
we've had a lot of cold snaps lately, and they started to die off. So I thought it would be good to talk about how you can use the Raspberry Pi for gardening, because it's that time of the year again. Got my spade. Now, hold on, let me get my screen set up. Sorry, I wasn't ready. I wanted to show you guys first an example project that we covered. Somebody made a Raspberry Pi aquaponic irrigation system, and it was monitoring not just aquaponics, but it was moving water from their pond over to their garden. So if you want to read up on that project, you'll have to check it out on our website. But it's really neat, and they made a system for it called Garden Pi, and it's so neat because you can just access it with a mobile device if you've got an Android iPhone, or if you have a tablet, something like that. And the community, like we were saying earlier, the community has done so much, and on a global scale, people all over have made tons of cool stuff for gardening with the Raspberry Pi. For example, this is called MudPi. It's a smart garden system that you can find on mudpi.app, .app, for those who are listening and not seeing what I've got pulled up here. And it's compatible with everything from the 2B Plus all the way up to 0. And it can read a variety of sensors. There's all kinds of things that you need to monitor in a garden. And this is just an example of a couple of systems that people have created. I wanted to show you guys. Smart Garden System was one on Kickstarter, and that's actually a kit you can buy with components with a few various sensors to check on your plants. But I wanted to show you guys one that I'm working on myself, because you don't need to buy a kit. You don't always have to buy a kit. If you have sensors and modules lying around, you could probably put something together to check on your garden. So as a quick example, I've got this Raspberry Pi behind me here and my light. There we go. Now you can see what's going on. Now there's some numbers over here to the side, and that is actually read out from a light sensor. So maybe you want to see how well the light is in your yard. You could set up a Raspberry Pi in one section, see how much light it gets throughout the day, and determine whether or not what kind of plants you want to put in that area. And if I cover up this light, the number goes up. And if the light gets closer, the number gets lower. So you could use that to kind of gauge how much light your plant is getting and maybe optimize it for whatever kind of needs your particular plant has. And no case, we want it out because the Pis are pretty. You got to look at it. But if you're putting it outside, you probably want to keep that safe and maybe watertight. And that's just a little Python script that's picking up the sensor data. It does have a capacitor to keep that in check. But yeah, that's what I'm to share with you guys. It's you know, you can use Raspberry Pi for about anything with gardening.
Yeah, but I mean, it's absolutely classic. You start from something as simple as looking at the light, then you'll start looking at rainfall, then you'll start looking at humidity and the temperature. And then very soon you'll end up with a complete hydroponic system, and then NASA will recruit you to help them with getting plants to Mars. You know, it's just the way that from a really small beginning, things can just expand and expand and expand. And I think that's been one of the joys of the Raspberry Pi community, is watching some of the young guns actually come up and create, and then create again, and then iterate and create again, and then do something even better, and just keep stepping up to the next level. And then they sort of go off the radar because they've gone to university to study this thing that they've been playing with, but I think for me, I cannot believe that anything else gives the adrenaline rush when the kids have been trying to work on something. We've had the tears, we've had all the, I won't say tantrums, because funnily enough, kids who play with Pi don't do tantrums as far as I've ever seen. They always get their own bit. Why isn't this working? Why isn't that working?
It's predetermined to throw tantrums.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it's a jump up off the chair, high fives all round. Yes, it's working. Actually, we catch a few of the adults in exactly the same way at Pi Academy when they get to that point. But it's that achievement, and especially for the kids that I thought of this, I coded this, I wired this, this is mine, 100%. It's so important to creating the next generation of engineers and programmers, because that gives them the confidence that they can do it. Just like that guy Graham gave me, that I could do it. I could find the Control C, even if it took me 1,000,000 years.
Yep, that's the lesson that Raspberry Pi teaches you, and I think we all have to thank you and Eben and the community and everyone who's been behind this for giving us that opportunity, because it's part of our life every day. Raspberry Pi is part of my life every day now. It's part of my family time with my son, like pretty much every day. Although some days it's Raspberry Pi Pico, but it's still Raspberry Pi.
Well, there's another great development. It gives another opportunity. It's another level of opportunity to make and create and digitally make things. And there's so much cunning engineering inside that chip that it'll be years before we see probably the end of the trail of what people can achieve with it. I mean, we've already seen some fantastic things already.
Yeah. It's amazing, and of course we're always rushing to try and be the first to do something with it. I'm still trying to figure out how I can create a Bluetooth controller with it. We'll hope to figure that one out soon. But it's and not because I couldn't get a Bluetooth controller for $20, but because I haven't seen anybody do a Bluetooth controller with an RP2040 yet. So, it's. I think
one of the young guns might come through and beat you to it. There,
I'll look forward to. I'll look forward to that. I'll look forward to that. That's for sure. Well, thank you so much, Pete, for joining us. It's been a real honor and a pleasure to have you on our show. Thanks to everybody who watched and listened. We are on at 7:30 p.m. British time every week, 2:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern time. So we'll see you all next week. Thank you so much, Pete. Thanks, everybody.
You're very welcome.
See you next time. Bye, everyone.